Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sam Drew with the National Dropout Prevention Center, and I'm here with my co-host and colleague, Marty Duckenfield, also with the center. And we want to welcome all of you to Solutions to the Dropout Crisis, our monthly radio webcast. The program is brought to you by the National Dropout Prevention Center at Clemson University in partnership with Clemson Radio Productions and with the support of Penn Foster. And Marty, I think this is our 5th program of the year.
I know, it's hard to believe. It's already up to number 5, and we welcome all of you to Solutions. And actually, Sam, this is our final program for this school year. But we appreciate all of you who have tuned in today and those in the last several months. And, Sam, we've got something really special for our listeners today. You'll be interested to know that we've been hosting for the past 2 days the Summer Institute on Service Learning right here on the Clemson campus. We've had over 60 participants come from all over. And actually, Sam, they're right across the hallway right now listening to this. So hi, everybody. We're really excited. We've bribed them with potato chips and salsa and soda, but they're listening too in their group, and we hope that you're back in your schools and your communities listening as well. But because of the fact that we have the Summer Institute on Service Learning here, we're taking advantage of this timing to have 2 of our presenters from the conference with us here today in the studio. And we're going to be introducing you to them in just a few minutes. But first, the usual, the logistics. Radio webcasting is kind of a new format for many of you, and so we want to take you through this each time, especially for the new listeners. We have a PowerPoint slide presentation on the web page, which if you are listening, you're on the right page. And you will view it during the presentation, and that's at the same URL, as I said, as the entry point for this broadcast. On the web page, please notice the other excellent resources that have been collected for you to examine, either before or after the webcast. We have 3 videos and 2 PDFs of some recent reports. That's the Service Learning Standards and a new publication which links service learning and dropout prevention. It's called Engage for Success. We want you, our listeners, to participate in this program and be able to speak directly with our guests, and that's a very important part of our program, so please call in with your questions. Our toll-free call-in number is 888-539-8859, or if you're outside the U.S., it would be 864-656-4550. You can begin calling in now or any time during the program, and we'll put you on hold until we have an opportunity to take your call. So we're going to try and get as many questions in as we can during the broadcast.
Thank you, Marty. You know, Solutions to the Dropout Crisis is a professional development opportunity for all of you to join us in focusing on what is important and what is working in dropout prevention. One of our 15 effective strategies is service learning, and we have hosted this Service Learning Summer Institute here at Clemson for the past 12 years now to provide training for educators in this, and as Marty has said, the latest one has been going on just across the hall from us here at the Madron Center on the Clemson campus. We are very excited to have with us today Joan Liptrot, who is director of the Institute for Global Education and Service Learning, and Mike Schwarzbauer, a recent high school graduate from Blythewood High School in Columbia, South Carolina. And they're going to share with you just why service learning is such a powerful dropout prevention strategy. Joan and Mike, we're very happy to have you with us. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Dr. Drew. We're glad to be here.
Thank you.
The NDPC, National Dropout Prevention Center, has promoted service learning as one of its 15 effective strategies for dropout prevention because there's a very significant research base behind service learning, and from our own personal experience, we know that it has terrific potential, not just to enhance academic learning, but also has the capacity to foster resilience in youth, to help them overcome the risk factors in their lives. And this institute really has been focusing on that resilience. And Joan and Mike, along with others, are leading this institute. We've worked with both Joan and Mike for some time, respect their abilities, and I know they've been doing a terrific job with this institute. But how's it going, Joan?
Well, it's great. We're always pleased to be here. It's a beautiful campus, and we have a fantastic group of folks from across the country, folks from as far away as Alaska and people from right down the road here, not too far from Clemson. And we have an amazing group of young people from Richland School District 2's Youth Action Council that are helping us to present the information and facilitate the training for participants.
And the youth are doing a terrific job. I personally witnessed that. Mike, you represent them, and that's an important component of this institute. How would you say it's going?
I do represent them along with two other co-chairs, Nick Matrakos and Adrena Flowers. I think we've actually brought some new members to the council to this training, and they have done a fantastic job facilitating and really driving the point home of resiliency.
Fantastic. Well, we know our listeners will have many questions to ask you, and we want you to participate as listeners. That is a major part of this program, and I want you to remember to jot this number down. Let me give you the number once again, toll free at 888-539-8859, or if you're outside the U.S., it's 864-656-4550. Joan and Mike, we will. Well, in fact, I think we have callers already, but let's take a few minutes first and have you introduce our listeners to service learning as a dropout prevention strategy, and we'll ask them to hold the line, and we will break at some point during the presentation and bring those questions in.
Okay. Well, I guess we want to get started looking at the PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go to the second slide where we just talk about what is service learning, I think that's really the most important place to start, because most people think of community service and service learning, volunteerism, all kind of rolled together as one thing. And it's not the same thing. Service learning is, in fact, very different. It is looking at service that young people can be engaged in the community and making intentional, specific, and meaningful connections to classroom curriculum. So you see an example there that talks about a service project in a community cleaning up a river, some learning that's done in the classroom. And it's when connections are made between those two things that service learning occurs, along with several other elements of reflecting on the service and giving youth opportunities to take leadership in that. So if we go to the next slide, actually, we see a definition of service learning that was part of the National Community Trust Act of 1993. And I think this is the first formal definition that I have found of service learning. And you can see that one thing I think is really important is that it says that service learning is defined as a method. And that's really key, that we understand that service learning is a teaching and learning strategy. And also it talks about thoughtfully organized service experiences. And that's also really important. Most times we think of community service as something students go out and find opportunities to do on their own. And this is where teachers and students are working together to find meaningful service experiences in the community. And also it allows time for them to think about what they've learned from it and use the skills and the knowledge that they've gained by participating in that project in the real world. And always we hope that the service learning experiences are helping to develop that sense of caring for others, civic engagement, and sense of community. So that's a big formal definition. We know, as I said, that it's a teaching strategy. And if you look at the next slide, it does talk about, as an instructional strategy, what service learning does. And it does engage students in a lot of critical thinking and problem solving, which I think is really important and something that all schools are trying to do. And again, it's that real life application of skills. And I think that one thing we see when we work with young people across the country, and Mike, you can attest to this, is that a lot of students aren't seeing the relevance of what they're learning and why do I need to know this? When am I going to use it? And service learning is a great way to help students see how they're going to use what they're learning in the real world. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because of the nature of service learning, you're also helping young people to learn to work together as part of a team or a part of a community. And I think that's really important because that translates as well to later in life, there's not many jobs that you can do where you work by yourself. Some students think, oh, I'll own my own company. But I always say, well, who are you going to have to work for you if you can't work with other people? So it helps to develop some of those kinds of skills. And as a teaching and learning strategy, it's such a natural way of teaching because it's interdisciplinary. There's connections to all areas of the curriculum, language arts and science and math, and it's not, a separate 30 minutes kind of thing. It's where students see how all of those things come together and where they can see how math or science or some other concept applies to so many other things. And because it does all those things, it's a great motivational tool to get students excited and engaged in learning. And I think that's one of the key reasons that it's a great dropout prevention strategy, because it makes kids want to come to school. It makes them want to learn new things. So it's something that schools need to look at as an instructional strategy and a way to really get kids learning in an important, authentic, meaningful way. And the next slide is just, that kind of elevator definition. We see the definition from the National Community Trust Act, but at its most basic, service learning is helping students to use what they're learning in school to meet real needs in the community in a hands-on, interactive kind of way.
Well, I think that's a really good explanation of the definition of service learning. And we have a caller, Julie, who's been waiting for a good while. And why don't we take a quick break here? Julie, from Marshville, Wisconsin, do you have a comment or question for Joan or Mike?
Actually, I misunderstood. I thought I had to listen to this on the telephone.
Oh, wow. Well, you can continue to listen on the telephone. And Joan, I think, is ready to go forward then. But you may continue to listen. That's fine.
Okay. Actually, Julie, are you still there?
Yes.
Do you currently use service learning with students?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm an AmeriCorps Vista at a university here. University
awesome.
Of, University of Wisconsin, Marshfield, Wood County. It's a 2-year program, and we just started service learning here.
Well, great. Well, hopefully we'll provide some valuable information for you today. So please call back in if you have some questions.
Thanks for listening in, Julie.
So should I go back to the website and listen there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so I guess we'll
Onward,
move forward.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, when you asked me to do this, Marty, and said, can you put together a PowerPoint and some information? It was really hard because there is so much information out there and so many things I want to tell people, and we just have an hour, and we spent the whole day yesterday with our participants at the Institute going through what is service learning, what does it look like, what are the standards to make it effective, practice. So in trying to decide what I wanted to share with folks, I thought it was really important to share the service learning cycle, which you see on the next slide, because we tend sometimes to focus on the project, how many flood buckets did students put together, or how many kits of something, or, how many meals they made, when really, as an instructional strategy, the power of service learning is in the process that students engage in. And so this service learning cycle that comes from the National Youth Leadership Council in Minnesota is a great way to kind of look at that process. And I think for teachers, that's really crucial to understand that. So I guess maybe we can just talk about the process and moving through that to help us kind of understand what service learning looks like and how that's important to students. So on the next slide, it looks at the pre-service. And that's, one of the crucial pieces of service learning as well, is that it's thinking about what needs to happen before the service occurs. So we want to get students involved actively in identifying what is the need that's going to be addressed in the community. And, sometimes teachers, if you're a high school science teacher, you want to have a project that, is going to be focused on your curriculum goals. So identifying a need can be focused in a specific way, looking for environmental needs in the community, or, if you're in a government class, looking at needs, related to the topics that you're teaching. But what's important is that the young people get involved in identifying that need, and there's lots of ways to do that. whether it's having students create a survey that they distribute to people in the community or their peers at school. The community can be the school community, or having students interview folks in the community about the needs that they see. Or one of the strategies we used just yesterday was getting folks involved in a walkabout, where you actually go and walk around an environment with specific things that you're looking for. What are the good things that you see, the assets, and what are some areas that you could focus on and address through a service learning project. So, even if a teacher, as I said, has a focus area, science or something, you can still get students doing some research. It's really that, kind of looking at what is this need all about? What do other people know about it? And what do people think needs to be done? So that's really a great way to get started. And it also sets service learning up to be a great problem-based learning kind of activity.
Yeah, it seems to me that even in this pre-service phase, you've got very strong relevance. You can't get more relevant, really, than going out into the community and taking a look at the problems and issues there and then building a service learning project around that.
And, you don't have to be in a community where kids can go out and walk around. So people say, then we can't do this in a rural setting. But you can. And actually, a couple of years ago, I was in Arkansas, and there's a school there that has such a great partnership with their local newspaper that the newspaper publishes the survey that the students do. And then people fax it back to the school so that everyone in the community can participate. And then it helps students see, this is what other people think and care about. And that's a good way to start setting up that civic kind of connection. What do people think? That's public opinion. And then researching some of the laws and things and looking at public policy.
And you may speak to this too, Joan, but it seems to me also that it is really engaging for the community and re-engages the community, because the community as a whole really begins to look at youth, and particularly in communities where this may not be happening, as a part of the solution for things rather than part of the problem.
Absolutely. I mean, it really allows communities to transform the way they look at young people so that they're not the consumers of resources. They're not the ones that need assistance, but they actually they are leaders. And they are looking at, what can we do to be part of the solution and not be part of the problem. And, even in starting to do that, it's a great teaching strategy, because creating surveys, doing interviews, all of those things, you're starting to connect to things that students need to learn and understand in school. So from the very beginning, good teachers will find ways to start making, the learning relevant. There's a teacher that I've worked with in Pennsylvania who the science teacher gets the students identifying the need, and the math teacher works with the students to analyze the survey data and look at the demographics and create some charts and disaggregate the data and that sort of thing. So, yeah, it really starts getting students engaged from the very beginning. And then, teachers and students together can be looking at, once we identify a need, what are some learning objectives that we can be meeting? Or, basically, what are the skills that we need to know, what are the things we need to understand, what kinds of things do we need to be able to do in order to meet this need? And then looking at how can we connect that to curriculum? How will these things be reinforced by what we already need to learn? And the students from the Youth Action Council, just recently we did a workshop at the National Service Learning Conference, and it was really exciting to see two students, Stefan and Audrina, actually did an activity where they led teachers through looking at standards and how standards could be met by service learning. So it's not hard to do when students get involved. And having students think about all of that planning. Okay, if we want to do this, what needs to happen? What needs to take place? What are the steps that we need to follow? A lot of students, everybody wants to paint a mural, but if you just go out and start painting a mural, that's graffiti and vandalism. So there's some legwork involved. So there's some legwork involved in where do we want to paint it? Who owns that building? Can we paint it there? We certainly don't want students to do all of that. I actually know of a school that students painted a mural on the building of the school building. They had permission from the principal. The principal had not gone and gotten permission from the superintendent. And so over spring break, the maintenance crew washed it off the wall. So luckily it was a learning experience, and the principal was able to say that to the students, and the students went to the superintendent and got, permission to redo it. But again, sometimes those things happen. That's part of the planning and the learning experience for students. So if we go to the next slide, once we look at kind of what do we want to do before the service, it's important that from that needs assessment that students find a meaningful service experience, a way to address that community need that really fits with what they're able to do and what they value. And we often, when we talk about what is meaningful service and appropriate service mean, we mean that children as young as kindergarten, pre-K can get involved in service, but students in pre-K should not be doing the same kinds of activities as Mike is doing. While it might be fun, right, Mike, to be putting some hygiene kits together, I'm sure that Mike would be much more challenged and motivated to be researching issues of homelessness and public policy and finding other ways to deal with that. So, thinking about how do we make it meaningful for the students where they are. And then in the cycle, it's helping students to really observe and see, is our project having an impact? And we spoke about this yesterday. When I first got started at the Institute, I was working with some schools in Philadelphia, and the students were doing a needs assessment. They did a walkabout, and they were talking about the project they wanted to do, and they decided they wanted to clean up an empty lot. And the teacher was like, oh, gosh, not again. We do this every year. And so, observation is about helping students to see, are we just going to put a Band-Aid on this situation, and we're going to have to come back in a couple months and redo it, or are we really doing something to make an impact? And I think that's really important for students. And then to analyze and see the significance of what they're doing, not only the impact on the community, but also on themselves as well. What did I learn from this? What am I taking away? And how has it changed my views and opinions of my community or my role as a citizen in my community?
Well, we have a caller, Joan, and if you don't mind stopping for a minute, let's take our call from Lori, who is calling from Leesville, Louisiana. And we'll take that call, and then we'll have Katie. Oh, my tech people are telling me we've got Katie coming first. Now we're going to Lori. We are going back and forth. They're fighting for this job, but Lori's going first, and then we'll move on from there. Okay, Lori, do you have a question or comment for Joan and Mike?
Yes, this all sounds wonderful. I have a question. Does service learning benefit students with disabilities, and if so, how?
That's a great question,
That's a great
Lauren.
question, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, when we just spoke about the service process and making the service meaningful, it's service learning is a great teaching strategy because it's really appropriate for all youth of all different levels. And students with disabilities have for a long time been seen as recipients of service in our communities and the folks that need help. But service learning is an opportunity to find ways, for them to find ways that they can be contributors to their school communities as well. And, again, it's looking at what's appropriate and meaningful for them. Their projects may not be as involved as same-age peers of different ability levels, but certainly they can be as meaningful and as impactful on the community. And it also helps them to see how the things that they're learning apply to the real world as well. And, that's one of the reasons why service learning is such a great dropout strategy, is because we all need those opportunities to participate in our communities and to find some kind of meaning and purpose for ourselves. And so for special needs students and students with disabilities, it's absolutely a great strategy. And we want it also to be an opportunity for students with disabilities to be serving along with students in regular ed classes. And we often talk about in some of our programs, it's a great program for regular ed, special ed, gifted ed. It's something that everybody can and should be doing. So
okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Lori.
Thanks for calling in, Lori. And now, Katie, I think it is your turn. Katie from Los Angeles, California.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a couple of comments and or at least one question. The comments, I just wanted to say thank you right away for pointing out that service learning is a methodology. I'm really glad that you kind of put that out in the front, because I think sometimes people get confused about what this is really about. The other thing I wanted to comment on is I do work also with youth organizers or people who aren't necessarily in a classroom setting, and we still like to share service learning with them as long as learning objectives are identified and students are connecting what they're doing to those learning objectives.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important.
Learning goals don't always have to be academic. They can be, we have social goals for them or leadership goals and those kinds of other program goals.
Yeah. Another thing, and you've been touching upon this throughout, and I just think it's really important that we do think about how service learning does help young people all the way from, K all the way through to learning about their role in a democratic society, and as well as gaining real-life skills and, as you pointed out earlier, this connection between what we need in our society and what we need in the business world. A lot of those things are those skills, the knowledge, the experience are interrelated and connected, and I think it's important to continue kind of including that in the discussion around service learning. But the flip side of that is that sometimes when people hear the word civic or anything about community, they right away think, well, yeah, that's the government class or the history class or social studies. And I would agree with you, as you've been pointing out, there are so many opportunities for teachers from all subject areas to be, involved in projects and or use this methodology in helping their students learn. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, the idea of, we really do want to help or to emphasize the important role that service learning can play in helping young people learn about their role, but we also don't want to narrow it so much that other teachers don't, think about using the methodology themselves.
Yeah, I think there's so many goals, and when you work with folks across the country and talk about why people, got involved in service learning or are interested, you get such a wide range. People who do come at it from that civic engagement side of I want to build that civic piece and good citizenship in students. And then you do find people who maybe, came at it because they want students to have those workplace readiness skills that you spoke of, or, kind of a vocational ed. When I first actually got involved in service learning, it was because as a teacher, I wanted my students to see how what we were learning was meaningful and how it applied to the real world. And so I think that's one of the interesting things as well, is that people come at it for different reasons and, for different purposes, but the end result is the same. And so I think I often talk with the students on the Youth Action Council when we're doing training about, some of what we do is marketing because we have to know our audience and what's important to them. Mm-hmm. And so we're here focusing on how, service learning is a great dropout prevention strategy. But, we could be tomorrow down the road talking about how service learning is a great community engagement, technique or a great way to connect with communities. Or, our institute is actually supported in part by State Farm Companies Foundation because they recognize service learning as a strategy to give young people the skills that they need that are often referred to as the soft skills, right? That those kinds of things that they want to see in future employees. That, learning that working doesn't happen in a vacuum by yourself. You have to be able to get along. You have to be able to find problems if something's not working, and find creative, productive ways to solve them, create a plan to do it, and follow through. So, I think we have to be careful not to put it in one box.
Yeah, that's a good point. If I can interject here, Katie and Joan, I think what comes to light is that all of the strategies that we really promote as dropout prevention strategies are strategies that are good for all kids. And if implemented, they really reform our schools in a way that makes them much more relevant, the learning more relevant, more engaging, and are not just for kids who are prone to drop out, although we list them as dropout prevention strategies. But service learning certainly contains a lot of those strategies and is good for all students.
Well, we really appreciate your call, Katie.
I actually have a question.
Oh, yes, a question.
I'm sorry.
But the conversation you're bringing to the program is wonderful. Let's have your question.
Good. Well, here in California, we have a statewide service learning regional network, and this year what we've decided to kind of, come together around is dropout prevention. But one of the struggles that we have is the research component. So I would just ask that as the webcast goes on, if you could mention any research data that you've used or know of or has been, really successful for you as you're trying to outreach and teach others about service learning and its, link to dropout prevention, that would be really helpful. And so I'll go ahead and hang up. But thank you very much.
Well, thanks for calling, Katie.
Sure.
I think foremost, I think right now what everyone in the field is talking about is the research that was done by John Bridgeland and some others that was a follow-up to the silent epidemic. And the new report is called Engaged for Success, and that's, as Marty said on the website, that's really important. And I think in there is cited some research that has also taken place in different places. I know Learn and Serve Florida a couple of years ago did some research that looked at, through their evaluations, decreasing discipline problems and increasing school attendance, which we know are big factors contributing to young people dropping out. So there is some there. There is a lot of research that's been done. It's as we have been speaking about, Marty and myself and some of our colleagues, about the need to get more data that is really looking at how service learning's role in dropout prevention. The challenging thing is that I think with anything, Marty, don't you agree that it's hard to pinpoint what is the one thing?
Right.
How do you know that it was this that made a difference?
Exactly.
Because service learning can do so many things for schools. It also changes the school environment. It changes people's attitudes and views, and so some of other things may change in a school besides just the student when schools are engaged in service learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and service learning is such a complex type of methodology that there's so many factors to look at. But we could do a whole other program on some of that sort of stuff. Yeah. But we're gonna have Dr. Drew say something apparently, and then we're gonna move on.
Well, yeah, and I want to make sure that you have time, Joan, to get through all of your material because you've got a lot prepared for us today. But while we're on this question of this issue of methodology, I would like to ask one question. That is, as we've traveled around the country, we've been in and out of schools all over the country. Most often, we've noticed that service learning often happens with one teacher in one classroom, and that's a person who's very excited about service learning and generally has the support of the administration, and it happens very well in those classrooms. But how can we begin to, I know we are promoting, how can we get service learning adopted really school-wide, and what are the main barriers that hinder that, and how can we overcome them?
Holy cow, that's a big question, Sam. How much time do we have? Well, I think, first of all, we do see schools where it's happening with one teacher in one classroom, and we see schools where it's happening in lots of classrooms with lots of teachers. And this is probably just my personal opinion, but I think that, service learning is a teaching methodology. It's a way of teaching, and so it's a way that maybe isn't always perfect for every teacher. Some teachers are not as flexible to maybe implement it. So I always caution folks to be careful. We don't want to be mandating it. That's a great way to kill any good idea. But it should be one of many strategies that schools use that are active and engaging. I worked with teachers who use simulations, getting students involved in that way. And it's a different kind of strategy. What we see in schools that gets it to spread is when it does start with a small group of dedicated, caring teachers who do it and love it, and kids get excited and they love it, and the other teachers start to ask them, what are you doing? How do you do it? And a teacher might say, hey, can you get involved and do this piece of it? And actually, I think there was a study that was done several years ago by the Kellogg Foundation that was kind of a retrospective that looked at how do we get service learning to kind of a greater capacity. capacity and bigger scale. And they showed that where it was successful and it was sustained over a long amount of time is where it did start that way. It starts small and it grows, and people do it because they want to and they see the value. And again, it's that talking to teachers about what is it that you want to accomplish with students. So for some teachers, it will be, I want to make my students love math, or I want to get them excited about this. For some teachers, it may be, I need to teach these standards. Okay, well, service learning can do both of those. So again, it's kind of in how you present it to teachers. But I think it's okay, and people may be out there gasping, but I think it's okay if every teacher doesn't do it. Also, if we have every teacher in every class in every school doing service learning all the time, I don't know, Mike, would you get tired of that?
Probably.
You know, it has to fit. It has to be a natural connection to the content of the class. But it should be something that is happening out of school. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No,
yeah, it should be something
yeah.
that's there. It's one of the options of many things that are happening. But I don't think it has to be something that every teacher in every classroom does.
That's great.
Okay, I'm going to give the number right now, and then, Joan, let's move on. The toll-free number again, for those of you out there who'd like to participate in this conversation, is 888-539-8859, or outside the U.S. is 864-656-4550. Okay, John, let's move on.
Okay, so I guess we're at the point in the PowerPoint slides that looks at post-service. So once the service is done, and this is, again, a key place where service learning is real different than community service, because it's not just about, the service is done, you pack up your stuff and you move on. But there are actually opportunities to kind of evaluate what new understandings did we gain from this? What did I discover about myself? How have my perceptions about my community and the world changed by participating in this? And also having the community come together, the people that participated in the project, both as partners and maybe recipients of the service, along with students and school personnel, to look at, look what we've been able to do by working together and empowering young people. So that kind of closing reflection and an opportunity for students to demonstrate to others, which again, Sam, is a great way to get other teachers to buy in when students demonstrate, here's what I've learned from this. Here's what I'm taking away. And then part of that is always looking at, what new concepts do I have, but also what still needs to be done. How do we, again, move forward? Or what other things still need to happen to continue to address this need and move us forward?
I mean, reflection is such an important part of service learning, Joan. I don't think we can emphasize that too much, can we?
No, and actually that's on the next slide. One of the great things that the cycle does, that kind of graphic, is it shows us that ongoing throughout the service learning, before, during, and after the service, reflection is crucial. And reflection is that time for students to stop and say, this is what I've learned. This is how I'm thinking differently. And I think reflection is so important because brain research shows us that our brains always ask two questions when we're presented with new information. The first one is this relevant to me? Why should I care about this? And does this have meaning? Does it relate to something else that I know? And that's what reflection is allowing students to do, to answer those questions based on the service that they've done and the learning that has occurred. And so it's happening throughout the whole process. It's that stopping and saying, sometimes folks think it's looking at, did you like the project? No. Did you, what did you like about it? It was fun. It's not that. It is about, I think Janet Eisler and those folks do a good job in the Practitioner's Guide to Reflection in talking about the value of service learning to help aid personal development of young people, to help them explore and examine their connections to others, to look at, that sense of citizenship and how I connect to my community, whether that be just my school or my neighborhood, my state, or the world. We're in a global community now, and students are getting involved in service learning projects that reach out around the world. So looking at those, having students, look at what skills and knowledge did I gain, and then also, finally, now that kind of new application. How have my perceptions and things, how has this experience changed me? And I think one of the things that's important too, and I think, Marty, you can speak to this being here at Clemson University, a lot of colleges and universities now are not just looking for young people who've been involved in 50, 100 hours of service, but who are able to articulate how has being involved in this experience benefited you and your community. How has this changed you? What did you learn from it? And that's what reflection does. And that's why it's so important to be sure that it's happening throughout the service learning process and that it's done in a variety of different ways. That's kind of my thing, as the folks across the hall in the Institute could attest to, that I think it's really important that we're reflecting in lots of different ways so that we're tapping into different learning styles of students.
Well, you're exciting a lot of people out there. We have several calls here waiting, and so we're going to try to get to all of them and take a little break now. Take a deep breath, Joan. And Rebecca from Charleston, do you have a comment or a question for Joan or Mike?
I do. I have a question for Mike.
Oh, good.
I was wondering if he could maybe share with us some of the ways that service learning has been a powerful piece of his school experience.
That's a great question.
That is a great question.
That's good, because that was coming later. To get to that, that's
actually,
really
if you
important.
continue to listen later on in the program, you'll be hearing a little bit about my story and how it's kind of changed me for the better. So if you want to wait till later on, we can continue that.
All right. We'll hold that, Rebecca. He's going to answer your question, but in an appropriate position later on in the program. But we've got Cliff calling from Florence, South Carolina. And Cliff, do you have a question for Joan or Mike?
I guess this question is mostly for Joan. Listening to the program, fantastic stuff that she's presenting, but I guess my question would be, if you're a novice in it, how does one get started in the service learning concept and how to get initiatives out into the community?
Cliff, that is a great question, because one of the things that we also struggled with in putting this information together is that it can be overwhelming, but actually service learning is not hard to do. It is pretty simple. And a friend of mine, actually the advisor to the Youth Action Council, Bev Hyatt, always tells folks the key is to start simple and simply start. And so I think that really is a good way to say, find one simple project that you could get started with, and don't try to be working with every group of students that you work with at once. So if you're a middle or high school teacher, start with one class and start to look at how could I start to incorporate service into one section that I'm working with, one group of students, and find one small project, and have really, that's the next slide, that youth voice and ownership and empowerment. Put the question to the students and say, what is it that you think we could do? And they will have many of the answers. Trust that once you present it to them, they'll be excited and come up with some simple things. The hardest thing is to just start simple, because, to say we're going to start on a small thing, and realize that every time you do service learning, you grow and change in your knowledge and experience and comfort with it as well. And so, Mike, you've probably seen this in the years that you've been at Blythewood High and you've been involved with projects. Each time you do it,
you become more natural at it almost, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as somebody who's been working also with teachers, you've probably seen that evolution of teachers as well.
Mm-hmm. The first project we did with a certain teacher, they were ripping their hair out, whereas the second year they did it, they were a lot calmer, and you can just see that they knew exactly where they were going with it, the process of it, and that they'd done it before, so they know exactly where to go with it.
And so the hardest thing is to realize that it may not be perfect the first time, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. It's a learning experience for you and the students. So, find something simple. We talk about how important partnerships are, but also, don't try to partner with too many people. Start simple. Start with something small.
And, sometimes a school is already doing community service, a project already, and it's one thing to take that community service, Joan, isn't it, and turn it into service learning?
Yeah, actually, that's a lot of the work that we've been doing actually in Mike's district. Is they have this great history, a really strong history in Richland too, of what they call winter projects, where students are doing service in the community around the holidays. Mm-hmm. And so we've been working with the students and the teachers there we don't want you to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to create something new, but look at these projects and how could they be enhanced and made more meaningful by connecting them to the curriculum.
Right. Well, thanks so much for your call, Cliff. We'll take one more quickly. LaShonda from Estill, and then Estill, South Carolina, that is, and then we'll move on, Joan. But LaShonda, have you got a question?
Yes, I do. With service learning is an awesome tool, and with so many things that, teachers already have to do, so many, deadlines to meet, so many regulations and tests and everything they have to look at, how do you get teachers to see that service learning, and not just teachers, anyone, to see that service learning is not extra work, but it's just another resource to help to get students to learn whatever is trying to be taught?
Wow, that's a big question, LaShonda. And because that is a challenge. I always say to teachers, this is not something more on your plate. We have enough on our plates as educators with state standards and, trying to meet even just the needs of our kids. It's not something more on your plate. It is the plate. And so once we introduce people to that concept of what service learning is, it's important to spend some time saying, what are these other initiatives that you have to meet? Do you have character ed goals? Is it standards? What are those things? And help teachers to see how service learning can also be a strategy to meet those goals. So it's not something more. It's not something extra. It's just a different way to do all those things that you already have to do in a way that students are going to respond to much more positively.
Right.
Well, thanks so much for your call, LaShonda. Okay, Joan, off we go.
All right. So I guess as we're moving through the slides, we're on that another piece of service learning that is ongoing throughout the service learning cycle, and that is youth voice and ownership. And Mike, do you want to explain about that?
Sure.
What that is? What does that mean, Mike? Youth voice and ownership.
Well, it's giving youth the choice and the voice of the project. So, instead of saying you have to write a journal, it's giving them the option to maybe say, I don't want to write a journal because that's not something interested in me. That's what I want to do. It's giving them the choice to say, I would rather do maybe a body map saying each part of my body on this map means a different certain thing for me for this project.
Okay. Giving them choices and opportunities to choose how they're going to reflect on it. Also, I think, the Youth Action Council is a good example of youth voice and ownership because there's so many kids that come from all over the district, but people have different roles.
Absolutely. It's kind of funny because I was actually interested in technology and not exactly public speaking. It's not my forte.
We would never know that.
And so it's interesting that the Youth Action Council actually tapped into my technology interests, and now I've become their web developer and designer and actually host their website and host all the documents and things like that on there, where it's, pertaining to me, it keeps me interested in the service learning as well because it's something that I'm interested in already. So connecting that is just...
Yeah, and so he's been walking around the Institute with his camera. I keep running away and hiding from him. But I think that's really important, too, is realizing that everybody doesn't have to do everything, but everybody must do something and can do something, and finding that. So, everybody doesn't have to take the lead, but giving students leadership roles. The Youth Action Council this past year had 3 co-chairs that came from different schools. There were lots of opportunities for young people to step up and take a lead. And I know lots of schools who, when students are doing a project, they have a student leader, a chairperson, something, so that it doesn't fall all on the teacher. And the students actually, take that leadership, what needs to be done. Students are reporting to them. Well, and actually, in fact, Mike, this year you stepped up again at Blythewood to help them with their Youth Organized for Disaster Action program. Several teachers were doing things involved in that program and kind of needed somebody to coordinate it and make sure that they were getting, reports were getting done and their information was getting back to us. And so you kind of served as a leader.
Yeah, actually, between the teachers having to rush around and do everything else, it kind of acted as a communication board and a little reminding service. Don't forget, the financial report's due next week, so.
And I think, something is, like that isn't really a hard thing for a student to do, but it's so important to just be that connection. And then also, looking at once you do the project and you get this, you want to see, did you have an impact? That doesn't have to be the responsibility of the teacher to analyze that data. Rob Schumer at the University of Minnesota does, and actually I think it's one of the Linking Learning to Life books, Marty, is he does the great youth as evaluators and really getting them responsible for looking at the impact of their program. I actually observed a group of students at New Foundations Charter School in Philadelphia who were kind of planning their evaluation. They give mini grants to other classes in the school and in the community, and so they were talking about, we're giving out this money, how do we know that it's doing what we want it to do, and what are our goals for our program, how will we know if we're reaching them? And I remember sitting watching them learning about evaluation with a chocolate chip cookie, which was tasty and yummy in the afternoon. But then also, they were middle school students. They were 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Yeah. So they were able to really, look at that and see how are we going to, make our project meaningful. So if we move on and we talk about service learning, you'll see the next slide talks about something that I think is really important. One of the reasons that service learning is such a great teaching and learning strategy is because it incorporates 3 things that we know about what helps people to pay attention to a learning experience. And so it's obviously choices are throughout the process. The learning is relevant because you're looking at the community that students live in and care about, and it's engaging. Students are not sitting in a classroom staring at a chalkboard or a textbook. They're out in the community, getting their hands dirty or getting involved in things. So I'm going to move through some of these a little more quickly. If you look at the next slide, it talks about why service learning is a great dropout prevention strategy. And again, I think we touched on some of these, that it's a variety of teaching strategies. It's tapping into different learning modalities. It's, a lot of project-based learning, civic kinds of engagement. It's not boring. And again, there's that word we keep seeing. Sam, you mentioned it earlier, that relevance. It's making the connection for students. How is this important to me? Why do I need to know or care about this?
This is a huge point here. I think we just need to stop and take a breath and look at this slide. We've been talking a lot about this at the Institute the last couple of days. And when students talk about why they drop out of school, one of the things they say is they're bored. And they don't see, why do I have to learn this? They see absolutely no relevance to their lives or anything they can imagine. And yet this is a totally different experience when they're involved with service learning.
Right, because it's not about, is this going to be on the test?
Yeah, and don't forget the first one, a variety of teaching strategies, because we also hear all we get is lecture. Yeah.
And, I mean, if we think about ourselves, we have a room full of people across the hall, and we have been very intentional as we're working with the students about, okay, how long are they going to be sitting? Nobody wants to be sitting there, listening for 3 hours. So, right, how can we get them up and moving and doing some kinds of hands-on activities, but that are not just fluff, that are meaningful. And that help them helps to reinforce the strategies that we want them to learn. I think that's a really important point, that we see so many students who sit back in school with their feet up on the desk and they're not challenged. It's not that they're not smart and bright. It's just that they don't see the value of what they're learning. And actually, quite honestly, what they're learning, you can find out so much information now on the internet. I think I saw something that said there's more information produced in 1 week of a Wall Street Journal than there was produced in William Shakespeare's entire lifetime. So, information is changing and growing so rapidly. So, merely knowing the facts is not what students need. They need to know how to find information and become lifelong learners. And if we go to the next slide, it's again making those connections, and everyone, it's a basic need to feel like you belong to something, to feel like you have a place in the world and a place where people care about you. And service learning is about creating caring environments in the classroom, in the community, and helping us to make that connection to other people. It's interesting. I've been talking lately with people who have a cyber high school, where students are all over, and just they go online and they do their work. And it's interesting because they're interested in how can we use service learning. because what they're finding is that even though students like learning at their own pace and online, they still have that need to connect with other people. So I think that's really important, and helping young people to see, how do we solve problems? How can I, take a lead in this and learn these strategies?
This is another one. I mean, I think every one of these is such a powerful point, and I'm just going to take a pause to reinforce them. But so many of our young people who do drop out do not have any connections to school. They're in their peer groups that they're in are risky, if one could describe it as that, and they may not be the athletes. They may not be the musicians or the artists. They don't have something that has really grabbed them yet. And yet, wouldn't you say, Mike? I think we might want to get to Mike.
I think this might be time for Mike's story.
We need to get to Mike's story. Mike, why don't we? I don't even care if it's on the slide next. Let's go to Mike. Rebecca wanted that, and we want to deliver to Rebecca, and all the others are waiting to hear more from Mike.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, I think this is a good place for your story because.
Okay. All right. Well, to begin it, a couple of years ago, I was a ninth grader. I recently graduated, and as a ninth grader, I was finding myself without a lot of direction. You can kind of call me the service learning poster child in this manner. At least Beverly High calls me that. But in the ninth grade, I was doing, stupid things with stupid people. I mean, not necessarily bad things, just, I didn't have a lot of direction. And throughout my years, my grades weren't exactly great, C's and D's, sometimes a B, maybe I get cake afterwards. So, meeting through people in Richland 2 after moving there, my 7th and 8th grade year, I met some people that were, really interested in the service learning. And being friends with one of them, they invited me to a service project which focused on elderly homeownership who had their homes weren't exactly safe to live in, or there were some defects that caused their home not to be as safe as, it should be. And what they do is they go out and repair their homes and things like that. And when they invited me to this service project, I was kind of like, that's kind of cool. I like to help people out. But I never really understood the connection at that point that this is something that we're doing in class as well. So, I met with these people, and the council actually kind of taught me a little bit, and they said that, I showed up for a few more service projects, and I was a dependable, and I wasn't an axe murderer, so I was...
Great qualities, yeah.
I was okay in their book. And so they asked me to be in the council, and for those of you who know Beverly High, you should have seen her eyes when I told her that I had an interest in technology, and especially web development, because they were looking for someone to do their website, which kind of tied both our hands together, because I said, hey, you need a website, and I'm interested in doing it. So, you kind of get to my niche and kind of use what I like to do already to maybe be a part of the council, and kind of kept me, engaged with it. Since 9th grade, I've done a lot of opportunities. I've worked with Joan's organization in Philadelphia, speaking along with the National Service Learning Practitioner of the Year, Mary Rogers, along with them. Had a lot of numerous opportunities, including this one. It's really changed my life. Recently, my GPA is actually now 3.0.
Woo!
It may not seem like a lot to most people, but for me, from coming from, C's and D's in my freshman and sophomore year, to coming up to this and seeing the academic connection for me, as long as my personal connection, where I feel much more able to talk to elders and seeing that they respect me more. Teachers in our school and things like that.
By elders, you're not referring to me and Marty and Sam.
Of course not.
To people in the community.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, it's been a great experience for me, because before service learning, I was an at-risk youth. Who knows? I could have been dropped out. I wasn't having a lot of direction. There wasn't a point in my life where I said, hey, I finally got involved with this council, and they said, this is what we do. Are you interested? And, going through what they do and learning all the things of service learning and what it does for other people, I can't think of a better educational practice than this for students. So.
And so working on the website has kind of been like a service learning project for you, when you say, because while
Absolutely.
You went into it, it was something you were interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it was definitely a learning curve, especially for me. I knew that there was a service to do that, and then learning how to do it within classes and things like that, and teachers helping me out saying, this is how you do it. And then being able to provide that service for the council to share their information, it really hit home, and it's been a great experience.
What are you doing after this? Not going to Disney World or no? What are you doing? Because you said you were an at-risk youth, and you weren't sure that you would stay in school.
Actually, next year I plan to attend Middle's Technical College in Columbia, South Carolina, and from there I'll be transferring to University of South Carolina for their technology support and training management, which focuses on network administration, database administration, and website administration. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Woo. I mean, it's such a pleasure knowing Mike and hearing his story, and we appreciate the fact that you share it with us, because you certainly illustrate many of the points we're making in a PowerPoint, but you're a living, breathing example of it. And he does a lot of that. So he's
I feel like we should hold hands and sing Kumbaya or something, Marty.
We're about that point. But we want to.
Well, I think it speaks to this whole issue of resilience. Joan and Mike, and Mike, it is a tremendous story, and it's a great and strong case for how service learning can impact individual lives, and that may not be research, but it's certainly strong anecdotal evidence, and certainly made a difference in your life and every other young person that talks to us with a similar kind of story. And Joan, you have lots of these stories, I know, as do we, from visiting schools.
And it's just amazing. I mean, the more schools you work with, the more amazing stories that you hear, that, you know, kids who have said, I was going to drop out. I wasn't going to stick around. And then I started getting involved in this project. And it also, you know, really helps students to be successful. And if you look at the next slide where it says service learning promotes real success, that I think that the folks who know Mike will speak to that I, in knowing him for the past several years, have also seen that growth in self-esteem and confidence in himself and what he can do, and a sense of really being directed and having, you know, goals and things that he wants to accomplish. So, you know, I think that that does come from, you know, helping other people, and that sense of I'm not doing it also not just because it makes me feel good, but because it's the right thing to do. And that's the kind of person that I want to be. And I think that's something, too, that we see a lot in young people, that just helps to make them to be more well-rounded, successful, resilient adults.
Well, we're actually at the bottom of the hour already.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about a radio webcast is we're not held to an hour. So we're going to go over a little, because I want you to have an opportunity to talk for just a few minutes about this whole issue of resilience.
Yeah, if we can skip through the next couple of slides and past Mike's story and to get to the slide that says, what is resilience? I think that is really important. Resilience is at its basic the concept of being able to spring back or rebound or, you know, face adversity, to overcome those things and not be overwhelmed and consumed by the stressful situations that it might occur in your life. And unfortunately, we see that for some young people, it doesn't have to be a big, major life kind of event. Sometimes it's the stress of everyday life. We see so many young people who are living in communities that aren't safe, that they don't have a lot of resources. They're, you know, not living with their parents or living in homes where there's drug abuse or other things. So just waking up every day and getting out of bed is a stressful situation. And so what has happened over several years, and I think beginning back in the 50s, research was done at looking at how are some people who live in these kinds of conditions or who experience a great tragedy, how are they able to overcome that, to not let it consume them and, you know, kind of be the thing that ruins their life, but be a resilient person and overcome it and be successful. And so lots of research was done, Bonnie Bernard, Nan Henderson, lots of folks, and I think it's exciting that you all here at the Dropout Prevention Center have kind of taken all of that research and compiled it into the Bouncing Back, Strengthening Resilience Through Service Learning publication to kind of put it all together for folks. But what we know is that resilience what builds resilience in young people is having relationships, and a relationship with one other caring adult can make such an impact on a young person. So if they're not, you know, getting support and a great connection with someone at home, having that one other person in their life that believes in them and cares about them and is there for them is so crucial. And also, you know, having a sense of independence, being able to recognize that I can do things for myself, I can solve my problems, I'm not a victim to whatever is happening to me. That sense of competence, again, also that I can do these things, I can overcome them, I can make things better for myself. We also see that resilience is a sense of creativity, finding ways to creatively solve problems and get, things done. So being able to look at a situation and find creative ways to solve it. And basically resilience too is that sense of optimism that, you know what, I can have a bright and promising future. I am not defined by my life situation or where I am or what's happening. But I have the power and the ability to change those things and do that. I think that's what you all have been calling RICO. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great way to remember it, those concepts of resiliency. And those, again, concepts, while they may seem kind of abstract, and how do we do that? What we know is that by engaging in service learning, and if you are listening for the past hour, hopefully you see, wow, those are all the things that service learning does. I mean, it's almost a no-brainer. It's pretty simple that, service learning is about relationships among students and teachers, and helping students to form relationships in the community and getting that creative problem solving. I can do something.
And it's been exciting on the last few hours at the Institute that participants have been looking at service learning and seeing in so many ways how these components of resiliency can be fostered by the experience. So it's kind of you do it at home and you'll be able to find the same answers. It's fabulous.
Yeah. I think because service learning in itself kind of incorporates all of these, the concepts of RICO and reinforces them and kind of models that for students in a large kind of teaches them, as good education does. It's teaching them how to live these kinds of strategies.
Well, you've both done just a terrific job of introducing us to service learning. Joan, you forewarned us there was more information here than we could possibly cover in an hour, even an hour and 10 minutes. And I know there's much more that our listeners want to know about service learning and the relationship of service learning with dropout prevention. So please remember that there are other resources listed on our website for this radio webcast. Remember also that these webcasts will all be archived, so you can go back and listen again if you missed something. Please recommend them to your friends and colleagues and ask them to listen. And you can also use these archive programs as professional development activities for an entire faculty or for a community group.
Yes, and while we're going to be off next month, you can listen to all 5 of them, Sam. They can get caught up. But we are going to take July off, as many of you are. But when we come back in August, it will be the 4th Tuesday of the month. And we will have a whole new set of programs coming for you in the fall. One thing that's new is I gather that you can now subscribe to our program on iTunes from our website. So have a look at that. I mean, this is the big...
You guys are so hip.
We are there. We are there.
And we were here for this, Mike.
Yeah, just take it with you. But so we look forward to having all of you with us again in August.
Great. I want to thank our guests for this month, Joan Liptrot and Mike Schwarzbauer. Both of you, this has been a great introduction to one of our favorite strategies from 2 of our favorite people, favorite service learning advocates.
Well,
Thanks to all of you
Sam.
for listening and participating. Remember, we know why students are dropping out of school, and with research-based solutions, we can assure that all our students graduate. Join us in a couple of months for more solutions to the dropout crisis.